This episode, Keith really dives into what's going on in the theatrical experience. CinemaCon was this week, and there were a lot of folks that didn't show up. We're wondering what's going on. Are the politics really playing themselves out? Because the theatrical experience needs to be changed. We need to know what it's like to get a movie in the theater, or if we're ditching it altogether. Also interesting, Daily Wire came out with a film this week with DJ Caruso. So there's new players in this business that are doing something different. And we ask what that scorecard looks like. And can it be changed? Can we get outside of the Hollywood scene and go into sub-markets? Austin, Savannah, these new places are popping up. So we're gonna have a longer conversation right after this. It's good to talk to you, or good to see you this morning, and welcome to Hollywood Breaks. So somebody on our Rev community bulletin board posted this week, or maybe it was even, I guess it was a few weeks ago, but yeah, he was making the point that with the way Black Widow performed in the marketplace, his words are, I'm going Disney Plus all the way. No more theaters. Who needs theaters anymore? Going Disney Plus all the way. So I find that kind of interesting because obviously we're in a community of creative people. Like, we're Hollywood people. We make our money from film and marketing and broadcast television, whatever. So we're right there actually buying into this new consumer economy that says, hey, Hollywood is changed and I want to benefit from it as a consumer, even though we know it's affecting us from the inside out as providers of this thing. So that shift to me is so interesting that we all know it's happening. It's right before our eyes. And sometimes it's almost like they're just not paying attention. They'd rather just say the old mantra where they've always said. And there's the reality check of it's not going to happen again. It's not, we're done with that moment, as we've been saying, into the blockbuster.
Yeah. But, it's interesting you bring that up because it's tough to say whether or not it's a definitive, decisive, this is the way things are, because we are still in the midst of a pandemic and consumer behavior is still a little uncertain. But you're right. I mean, we had CinemaCon this past week, and, I literally wanted to bang my head against the wall with every new article I read after each studio presented. It was like, we love the studio experience. We are 100% behind the theatrical experience. We're all partners. You first had the NATO chief saying day and date doesn't work, which is, I would argue the data is not necessarily out that it doesn't work. You have Black Widow, which was a success per Disney. Yes, week 2 of a lot of movies dropped because of day and date, but that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't boost numbers for the providers. We don't know that. We don't have that data to make that distinction. And the other thing was, you had Sony coming out, and I applaud Tom Rothman for going there and being in front of the exhibitors. But he sits there, he and Josh Greenstein sit there and say, we support the theatrical experience. And Matt Belloni made a point in his newsletter about this.
Belloni, huh?
Belloni.
He's gonna love that. Let's make sure we tag him on this post right here.
I will tag him. I tag him all the time, and I always butcher it. So eventually, I think he'll reach out and be like, "Listen, pal, you got to get my name right if you're gonna reference me." Anyway, his newsletter, what I've been hearing, made a very good point, which I thought was spot on. You can get up there and talk about theatrical experience, but at the same time, they're selling their movies to Amazon. So which is it? I understand the idea that you don't want to lose your, shirt during the sort of uncertainty of the pandemic, but isn't there a way to sort of walk both lines? You can't have it both ways. And this is what frustrates me. They say that, and then their actions belie something completely different. And then you have the Warner Media executives who didn't even bother showing up. They didn't send anybody. They claimed that it was because they all had personal commitments. I'm like, yeah, right. Since when has anybody in Hollywood let a personal commitment get in front of their own egos? If they knew they were going to get rah-rahed and cheered, they would have shown up hook, line, all of them.
This is your personal commitment. You have to be, this is your person.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. They knew that if they showed up, they were going to get booed and popcorn was going to get thrown at them for Project Popcorn. And it's just it drives me nuts. It's we have a complete breakdown of leadership. And it's just unbelievable to me that we're all still pretending like everything's hunky dory, everything's going to go back to normal. Not one person talked about the experience of being in a theater. Chris Meledandri, the head of Illumination, sort of walked the line about being in a theater and the movie experience, and we're losing the definition of what a movie is. But then he turns around and says, well, we have to thank the streamers, because otherwise what would we have done the entire year during the pandemic?
But
I'm like, well, that's
they're just
not really
for Wall Street then, right? That's what they're really just doing.
Well, are they though? Because ultimately Wall Street's like all in for the streamers, and they think the theatrical is like a dunzo business. And it's like, it seems to me that until somebody in this industry stands up, a leadership, who's in a leadership role, and says, we have to make this experience better. We were limping along before this thing hit. It kind of forced a lot of changes that we'd all been talking about in the margins, but nobody really had the guts to try.
Yeah.
And now we're there, and we're still talking like everything's just going to go snap back to normal. The minute, but we still have the streamer, but it'll still snap back to everyone. I'm going to come to the theaters. It'll snap back to normal when everyone's comfortable. I just don't think that's
process it this way. Let's ask the question why they're not just calling it and say like, hey, the theatrical experience is dead. We are these major Hollywood studios. The best way to to hedge our way and have the film going experience of the future is to be on a streaming platform. Everyone, go upgrade your television sets and sound systems, right? Like, why not? They're just boosting another industry anyway. Why isn't Sony saying, go get better Sony products for your house? Because, well, I know why, because Sony doesn't have a streaming platform. But, there's a real understanding of this, and why not just call it quits?
Here's what I would say. You never want to say call it quits. I don't think the theatrical experience is ever going to be dead. As I said.
But the Cinerama Dome, what was the thing with the Cinerama Dome just 6 months ago or 12 years ago? I can't figure out pandemic timing anymore. But that was a whole kind of game of saying like, and we kind of covered this too. Maybe that was just a real estate play and nothing actually to do with the theatrical experience.
Right.
But there is someone in a theater being able to say, hey, we're kind of done unless something changes here. We need to make a better deal with Hollywood.
I think the answer is you don't say it's dead. You say it's time for us to evolve. We got to get ahead of this.
But what are they going to evolve into? Tell me what that looks like.
I mean, that in and of itself is a bigger question. Like, we've talked about the Paramount decree, and Disney could easily sit with AMC and like, listen, or one of the big chains is like, let's figure out a way that we can take the theater experience and move it to the next level. We are experts in creating a fantastic customer experience. That's why millions of people flock to our amusement parks every year. So let's figure out a way to make this work. Let's evolve it, because the fact that what irritates me is they're just sitting back being like, well, once we get the movies and the product in the theater, everyone will start showing up again. As if declining ticket sales were not a problem pre-COVID. They're completely in denial, and it drives me nuts.
Maybe
only because I love this industry so much.
Maybe the tie-in here is we're looking in the wrong place. Like the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit is a canary in the coal mine, possibly, and really the current contracts that we have in place. So agencies, reps, managers, talent, whatever that stuff, has a bunch of paperwork sitting around their desks, and they have to release in the theater. Mm-hmm. So maybe the studios are saying, we can't kill the theatrical experience. Otherwise this pile of paperwork we have is going to get 4 times as big because they all become lawsuits. Mm-hmm. Let's play this thing out. So looking at a 2 or 3 year plan, they're going to cloak and dagger this thing for a couple of years. And then they're honestly going to start writing in new paragraphs in their contracts that says it's all about the streaming. And we're going to pay you out or make arrangements in the payout in a different way. Because, I don't know, like there's plenty of different ways now to make distribution. There's plenty of films being created. Some of the films we don't even know about. Like, there are films today we don't even know, we don't have to know where every film's coming from, like in the old studio days, because the distributions are very easy. Yeah. And then you can make one and, Netflix is going to buy it after the fact, opposed to having to be financed up front. So there is, maybe the shift is happening, or it's happening slower because there are actually just some political elements that have to work themselves out through the system before the studio can actually make those changes.
I mean, that's entirely possible. I mean, I know that the contract issue with Town is going to be an ongoing thing for the next few years, and while everyone figures out what the landscape of, if I don't think day and date's going away. I think it's going to stay here. Where there are a lot of movies that'll probably be the 45-day window. Universal's made their deals where it has to reach a certain box office before it kicks in and reverts to streaming. So these
so which would allow them
evolve.
to get to streaming sooner than
Yeah,
if it doesn't.
exactly.
Yeah,
But you're right. There are movies being shot that we don't know about, like The Daily Wire, which is now becoming the new player in a lot of ways in Hollywood, which is great. And they're not even in Hollywood, which is even better. They did a movie with DJ Caruso, the director of Triple X and Disturbia, called Shut In. And it was actually a blacklist script, which for those of you who don't know, every year Franklin Leonard does a list of scripts that haven't been purchased that all like executives, assistants loved, but they just haven't been made into films yet. And this was on the list in 2019, actually. So the fact that they went ahead, Dallas Sonier, who was the producer of Run, Hide, Fight, got a hold of this script, pulled it out. I guess it was in turnaround at New Line, and pulled it up. They made it at Daily Wire. They got DJ Caruso attached. They shot it, and now it's like in the can, ready to rock. And
wow,
they did all
amazing.
this without really like letting anyone know it was happening.
I remember,
which is great.
Ben Shapiro talking about basically getting into the game, but it sounds like by the time he announced it, he actually had something in the can, was editing it.
Well, his big mantra has always been it, because his mentor was Andrew Breitbart, whose big thing was always culture is downstream of politics, or I'm sorry, politics is downstream of culture. So his thing has always been we've let sort of one political side, i.e. the left, dominate a lot of our cultural institutions, and we just let them take them over. Higher ed being one, Hollywood being another. And his whole thing is like, well, you know what? Let's try something new. Let's start anew. So we're going to start distributing just entertainment that doesn't play to one side or the other. It tells good stories. And we're not going to try to push one message over another. We're just going to tell a more balanced view of some complex issues. And I think that's great. I think it's really hard to just jump in and say, I want to start a movie studio, let's go, because the financial metrics are really crazy. It's hard to make money. The bonus that the Daily Wire has is they have a subscription base already built in.
That's right.
So they'll premiere it on Daily Wire, and their subscribers will get it. I would love if they put together a serious theatrical type campaign. And if they would like help in that, I'm happy to help in any regard. VisionCraftBrew.com. And they could really, because that's what they need. Because for talent, I mean, it's great they got DJ Caruso. That's huge. And they got a named actress too, which is awesome. But if they're going to start being able to pull more talent away from LA and sort of the New York nexus, they're going to need to have like that big hit and know that there's going to be like a moment that they're going to have support behind it. It's not just going to be thrown up on a platform. And I'll be also interested to see if there's going to be any sort of talk as their business model evolves, if there's going to be a theatrical component as well. Because Shut In is a thriller, apparently, and those kind of movies are really great for theatrical experiences as well.
It's going to be interesting. It'd be interesting to roll out of this. And I'm even wonder, you're making me think about why haven't they done a theatrical marketing release so that it feels, let's just use the word legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes I feel like these more agenda-based organizations, if it's churches or political parties or whatever, when they release content, mm-hmm. it's so transparently one-sided and almost hard to watch. I mean, it's not family friendly. It's almost weirdly a weird agenda.
Yeah.
That if if DJ Caruso is involved here, I wonder why his management group is not kind of forcing something. So it doesn't look like he stepped back and made a direct to distribution or direct to video kind of a film, but it's something that's out there and legitimate. So mm-hmm. That's curious to me that that just the Daily Wire marketing realm arm is not going to be strong enough to get DJ Caruso an Oscar. Not that he's going for that, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
do
listen,
eagle eye, you got to keep something up,
yeah,
in the hierarchy.
there's got to be, that's what I'm saying, like if this is going to become a legitimate enterprise, because I've had conversations with potential clients and they're like, I just want to start a studio, and I'm like, do you know how many times I've heard that statement, and it's gone right into the ash heap of history?
Yeah, exactly.
So it takes a lot, and as I said, the financial metrics are not easy. You're right in terms of sort of entertainment coming from a certain perspective, as particularly on the right, has always been very heavy-handed in its messaging and not very good at all, and almost too sort of in your face. And I applaud the fact that the Daily Wire is trying to just make entertainment with no sort of underlying political message. But again, they are a political site. They're a conservative site. So it's going to come with that sort of message attachment to it. But at the same time, that doesn't preclude them from trying to make it take a sort of moment to turn it into sort of like a theatrical like campaign.
Yeah.
And but again, that costs
I think
money.
that's totally legitimate. I think there's, I like the reality that there's a conversation taking place of, hey, it can't just be a one-sided deal. Some of what we're hurting in America with the separation of politics is that there isn't a balanced distribution of content, and way too much focus in kind of one political agenda. But yeah, it's really interesting to me, kind of going back to the idea of like what's happening in the theatrical experience, and recognizing Daily Wire Group could put together an entire film that nobody even knew about, was on anyone's radar, no one was talking about it, and it comes out of nowhere. It would be great to see what that audience looks like, to see, is this a legitimate business model? Because again, one of those big studio gatekeepers kind of gets knocked down. Like, do we really need the big guy's permission to make something? Or can you get legitimate distribution through something else? Because I think the pandemic has spread out so much of the talent all over the US. Like, there is opportunities now for small bands or groups to build something up. I think of what Austin did a few years ago, and how Austin really got behind the studio space and filmmakers and sound and visual effects companies, whatever. They were all they're happy to be part of a kind of a brand new order down there, and it was awesome. There's the ability to develop way outside of just the Los Angeles and New York marketplace to be an influencer in this, and this new model of like, hey, I could have a voice, I can make a film, and I don't need permission from one of the major studios to get there. I think that's awesome, especially if something they do can be an Oscar contender. Maybe we already know that to be true. I mean, the Oscar Award winners coming from foreign language speakers, like that wasn't created in a Hollywood studio. That was created, So yeah, what an interesting time. Like, really, maybe it's in our own head of like what holds us back, because there's this thought of like legitimacy. Like, is it legitimate if I do or don't do this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, because you talk about Austin, and it's interesting you referenced Austin, because I think it was almost 2 weeks ago, there was a huge article in the Hollywood Reporter about how Austin has become LA. It was like the COVID escape for a lot of people in Los Angeles. You've got a lot of actors that have relocated there. You have Matthew McConaughey, who's been a huge advocate of Texas and in general, and particularly Austin. Jared Padalecki, Adrian Grenier is there. I think James Vanderbeek moved his entire family out of LA because he was trying to fly a kite at a LA park, and someone told him you can't do that here, and he was like, all right, I'm done. So
we left Los Angeles, and our term was, it's illegal to be a child in Los Angeles.
Yes, that's like, essentially what it is.
No riding bikes, you can't walk on the streets, you can't climb a tree, all this
stuff. You can't do anything
without
without Gavin Newsom telling you can. So
exactly.
That's a large reason why a lot of people are leaving Los Angeles and California in general. But you're right. And, with the advent of we've seen Marvel has basically turned Atlanta into another Hollywood.
That's a great example. Yeah. Whole Georgia,
and just this week, which again, as most of you who listen to this podcast on a regular basis know, I'm a huge fan of pulling sort of the nexus of entertainment and Hollywood out of LA and New York, because I do think there's a lot of untapped potential. We don't need to be in LA and New York anymore. We can be anywhere in the country at this point. And I think that's the real opportunity here. And just this week, it was announced on Deadline that there's a new studio complex being built in Savannah, Georgia. So it's another one. It's this group. It's called Studio Savannah. It was a venture formed by two independent producers who love the city. They're building a sustainable sound stage, and will break ground next month. David Patterson of Arcadia Bay Entertainment and Taylor Owenby of ISP Global Capital are calling the complex Cat 5 for its ability to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, which is really smart when you're on the Gulf Coast like that.
Yeah.
But again, it just goes to show, like, we don't need, like, and I know their buildings, they have a huge studio facility outside of Philadelphia, which M. Night Shyamalan uses quite a lot. So there's ways to get out of there and just sort of break the mold of everything has to be in LA or everything has to be in New York. And I think
Savannah move is pretty brilliant. SCAD is there. Savannah College of Art and Design is there.
Yeah,
I think like there is a whole talent pool there. They've been basically bringing them up and then shipping them out to New York.
Shipping out to New York. Like, why? Everybody loves Savannah. It's a beautiful little city. Like, why would you want to leave? It's cheaper to live in Georgia than it. I mean, granted, you got to deal with hot summers, but
yeah,
you know,
and the tech needed to get a film made anymore. You honestly can carry the lights around.
I could do it on my computer right now.
Yeah, the camera, the sensitivity light, the cameras, you just don't need all the amperage and lighting and people and all that stuff.
You know, I always go back to, you know, Thomas Gigas, who was a guest we had a few weeks ago. And, you know, I reference this quote often, and I think it's so true. The bigger problem with Hollywood is 90 to 95% of the people who make movies live behind gates and work behind gates. And almost 95% of their audience does neither. So it's like there's that sort of bubble mentality that reflects in a lot of the work that comes out of LA and New York, because so many of these people, they're ultimately going to pick, you know, when you go to a studio exec, they're going to pick what they like, what they want. And they're in sort of the LA mode and the LA circle and that whole thing. And you know, a lot of them just really are about sort of telling the stories that are going to advance their careers. And they don't really have sort of any perspective beyond that. There is one producer who not long ago, I read an article that he gave in Variety, an interview he gave in Variety, which I think really nails sort of the distinction. And he's a minority in this fact. His name's Mark Platt. He's got very talented kids. Ben Platt, who's his son, who's like a Broadway star kind of guy. He was giving an interview shortly after he'd been fired from Universal, rather unceremoniously. And the interviewer walks into his office, and behind his desk, usually you go into an exec's office and all you see are pictures of him or her with every celebrity, director, everything they've always made.
Statuettes of one kind of religion.
Yeah. Behind his desk was just pictures of his family. And, you know, his kids and, you know, wife, all that stuff. And the interviewer asked, because she was kind of struck by the fact that, wow, that's different. And he's like, well, this is what I do. It's not who I am. And I think that's a very striking difference between, and again, like I said, that's a minority perspective in LA, because a lot of people there what they do consumes every aspect of them.
Yeah.
And I think that can sometimes reflect in the work. And that's why I'm really excited that you see a lot of the work starting to pull out, with sort of Austin becoming another component of sort of the entertainment space, and Savannah and Atlanta, and God willing, Philadelphia. I mean, that's one of my big things. I'd really like to turn Philadelphia into sort of a hotbed of the next phase of entertainment, because it's such a great spot. And so this is heartening to me. And this is what's so great. I think a lot of what is sort of the changes that the pandemic has brought forth, this is one of the ones I think that are positive. And I'm hopeful that this is a trend that will continue.
Yeah, it's almost like we should move away from CinemaCon and move into like StudioCon, because so that, you know, all these multiple studios that can and should jump up and are jumping up all over the United States. It's like, let's get all the studios together and talk about what studios are doing, opposed to we're bringing the studios together to talk about what the theaters are doing. Like that doesn't, and maybe it's too much of a competitive environment currently to be doing that. But as I've learned in the creative space, like the developing of community is pretty huge, and there's a lot.
Well, I
of
think
influence
what would be great is if there was sort of something that, I know a lot of like Disney does their D23, which is basically their version of CinemaCon, where they show all their material. They don't always go to CinemaCon, and I'm not sure if they came this year or not. I think they pulled out because of the variant or whatnot, but they're not going to necessarily be cheered if they were to go to CinemaCon. CinemaCon is really, having been to quite a few of them, it really is just basically a meeting of the studios. I mean, it's when everybody who works in the studio world just connects. I mean, you go to the Nobu bar, and it's like you're just bumping into. It's like you walk down the street, and oh, there's Josh Goldstein from Warner Brothers. Oh, there's Michael Moses from Universal. It's everybody's there now. That's how it was pre-COVID. I don't think that's how it was this year, but so it is kind of a studio con with the sort of the exhibitors just happen to be there. but it would be nice to sort of get out of that mindset. And like I mentioned this when they did the big screen is back. Like, why the hell did they do it in Century City? Like, come on, like you want to do it, go to Idaho or something, Ohio, like make it exciting. But instead they had to make it convenient for the people who can just get in their town cars and just be driven to the closest theater. They weren't
going to make a major rate to go make the
yes, but the press they would have garnered had they done that would have been tenfold of what they actually got.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, yeah, maybe.
It's still show business no matter what we come down to, so we have to feed the beast that's currently there. But I love the idea that these studios are developing in different ways. I think there's some real critical thinking needed in this industry. Just start asking the big questions. And if the blockbuster is gone, then the competition is different. And, hopefully the story is what we're going to be judging this on in the future. Like, last year's Oscar winner wasn't a major blockbuster hit. So now we go like, cool, we don't need to have a blockbuster success in order to be recognized or understood within this industry.
It's interesting because, I want to push back on what you've been saying. You've talked a lot about Oscar. And my big thing with Oscar is I don't care.
Like Oscar is done, is what you're saying.
The Oscar is done. I mean, they've because they got wrapped up in the whole wokeism, gender, all that stuff. They've just sort of the idea of getting into the Academy. I don't think it has the element of exclusivity that it once did, because they've just opened the gates to a lot of people who just happen to, I think.
Yeah, I guess if people aren't watching the TV show anymore, it's not as influential as it used to be, right? The viewing audience is basically less than a TikTok video, some TikTok influencer. So
that's the whole
Oscar show with major celebrities.
What I'm saying. I don't think Oscar has, and we've talked about this. Like No Man Land, yes, Best Picture, great. Was it okay? It was a good movie, but all the movies, most of them are depressing. They talk about life in America as horrible and downright awful, and I mean, is that really what we want? Is that really what is worth celebrating? I mean, it just goes to show that so many of the people that are in the Academy are just so micro focused in New York and LA that's really, that's all they can really focus on. And, to me that I just don't think Oscars, I think Oscars kind of done as well.
Cause I'll give you that. I think it's done or needs to be evolved. I guess what we're seeking out is the scorecard. So what is a scorecard? If it's not how much money you made in the opening weekend, or you didn't cross now the $1 billion line, forget the $100 million line. If you didn't cross these things, are you a major player? You didn't win an Oscar. That's one scorecard that you can use to. So what is going to be the scorecard of the future, especially if data is being held back behind, these walls, studio walls? We have to have some recognition of success. I mean, financiers eventually are going to want to say, is it successful in one way or another? And maybe Ben Shapiro is the one setting the new scorecard. Well, did I have political influence? Then it's successful. Did I need to get my money back? No. Did I change politics? Did I get my candidate elected? Okay, then successful. I mean, that would be very unfortunate, but it's possibly a reality of what what's coming is.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't
scorecard
come
will
to
change
that,
something like
but I hope that's not what comes out of this. And I agree. And this is something we've been talking about, is what constitutes a hit nowadays. We just had a chat about this with Free Guy last week, where I was adamant that I don't believe it was a hit, but it was.
Yeah, if you just saw the title of last week's show, you know that Keith doesn't think it's a hit.
I don't think I'll be sitting in a conference room with Ryan Reynolds anytime soon. But you know, you're right. It's like, what constitutes? Is it just because the trades and everybody works in the business? Oh, this is a hit. And like, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that constitutes a hit. I mean, I think everything is shifting right now, so we don't really know what the scorecard is going to look like. But again, I hope it's not. It's, oh, I got my candidate elected, or I won on this particular political issue, because that to me is not necessarily what we want.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why we do the show, because we want to be able to discuss what is changing, how it's changing, what the new opportunities are. Exactly. So if you're thinking about Hollywood breaking, you also want to figure out how to break into Hollywood, and that those are two important elements. And I think a scorecard, at least in conversation, it's important to know what your financier, studio, distributor, I don't know what you're going to need to partner with, but those people need to know what you're thinking of success looks like and be on the same page. So you can maybe even set, what the outcome is from a product by product basis. That might be pretty interesting.
Yep, I agree.
All right, my friend. Well, safe travels. I know I said safe travels to you earlier this week, but I know you're for sure.
Well, that was my
today.
fault. I thought, I literally in my head, I was like, oh, this is my last week, but I realized we're not leaving till tomorrow morning. So this is my last day in Maine. I will be back in a regular studio next week, next Friday. So
I don't even remember what that looks
return.
Like. So
I know. Yeah, most of our viewers may have forgotten it. I gotta figure out, I got to dust away all the cobwebs, because we haven't been back in Philadelphia in a while. So,
well, your return to Philly will be my excuse to go down to Newport Beach. So we'll be changing backgrounds again next week.
Okay, perfect. There you go.
Thank you for listening to Hollywood Breaks. We're so happy that you're part of our community. What's going on here? Please make sure you subscribe so you can get our latest updates. Sometimes we're not releasing always on Friday morning. So if you want to be informed when our release is, please feel free to subscribe. Also, send us comments. We love the comments. We read them. We're happy to hear what's going on. We do have Dina Benedon from Super 78 and Magic Screen joining us real shortly. And she's going to be talking to us what she did at CinemaCon and really what they're thinking about changing the theatrical experience. So, Keith, this is my gift to you. I'm bringing in somebody that's going to start talking about it.
Woohoo!
Be nice.
I'll be nice. I'm always nice. Come on.
And I'm looking forward to my case of that Vision Craft brew showing up in my Newport Beach house anytime now. So,
okay.
I'll
get you the coffee mug. Don't worry.
I appreciate it. Lydia, as always, thank you for keeping us on track and producing this thing, getting it out the door, and the team at Go Social and all that support us. We're so thankful for you. Until next week, we'll see you on Hollywood Breaks.